Picture this. A dusty barn in rural Quebec, doors bolted shut, windows blacked out. Inside, stacked from floor to ceiling, are bricks of $20 bills, thousands of them, bound in plastic wrap like bags of flour. It looks like the vault of a small nation. But not one of those bills is real. And the man who built this mountain of fake money out of nothing wasn't a criminal mastermind, a hacker, or a spy. He sold used cars. Frank Bourassa grew up rough around the edges, a few brushes with the law, nothing serious. The kind of guy you'd find haggling over a Honda Civic on a gravel lot. But underneath that ordinary exterior was a sharp, obsessive mind. Sometime in the early 2000s, Frank became fixated on a single, almost absurd question. What if you could actually replicate U.S. currency? Not crude photocopies, but bills good enough to survive a bank teller's eye, a UV light, even a counterfeit pen. He didn't just wonder, he decided to try. Real American currency isn't printed on ordinary paper. It's woven from cotton and linen, threaded with security strips, embedded with fibers that glow under ultraviolet light. Forging the design is one thing. Forging the paper is nearly impossible. So, Frank started hunting. He traveled across the border into Ohio, posing as a legitimate buyer, and tracked down a paper mill capable of producing something frighteningly close to the real thing. Paying in cash, hiding behind false names, he secured pallets of near-perfect counterfeit paper, and walked away without raising a single alarm. With the paper secured, Frank needed the hardest piece of the puzzle, the printing itself. He rented industrial space and quietly assembled an offset printing press, the same type used by real currency mints. For months, he studied genuine bills under magnifying glasses, breaking down every color gradient, every microprint detail, every hidden security thread. He tested ink formulas late into the night, comparing his prints against real 20s side by side, throwing out batch after batch that wasn't perfect enough. Slowly, the fakes stopped looking like fakes. By around 2010, Frank wasn't printing pocket change anymore. He had produced an almost unbelievable total. $250 million in counterfeit 20s, stacked inside that quiet Quebec barn. To put that in perspective, that's enough fake cash to fill a moving truck, bill by bill. He had built alone a counterfeiting operation on the scale of an organized crime syndicate, but producing the money was only half the problem. Now he had to actually get rid of it. Moving $250 million in fake bills without drawing attention is nearly impossible. Frank began selling bundles to criminal contacts at steep discounts, sometimes for just 10 or 20 cents on the dollar, letting middlemen take on the risk of passing the bills into circulation. But money this size doesn't stay quiet. Fake 20s started turning up in stores across multiple U.S. states, all bearing the same eerily perfect printing signature. Investigators noticed the pattern almost immediately. The U.S. Secret Service, the agency literally created to fight counterfeiting, joined forces with Canadian authorities to trace the bills back to their source. The trail led straight to Frank Bourassa. In 2012, agents raided his operation and discovered the remainder of his stockpile. Millions more in counterfeit cash, along with the printing plates, paper stock, and equipment used to build it all. It was, by most estimates, one of the largest counterfeiting busts in modern history. Here's the twist that still stuns people today. Facing what should have been decades in federal prison, Frank struck a deal. In exchange for handing over his remaining counterfeit bills, his printing plates, and his equipment, he received a fine of just $200,000 and a sentence that amounted to a few months with credit for time already served. For a $250 million counterfeiting empire, it was an almost unbelievable outcome. Authorities recovered a significant portion of Frank's counterfeit bills, but investigators believe a substantial chunk of that $250 million was never found. and may still be quietly circulating somewhere in the world today, indistinguishable from the real thing. Frank, for his part, didn't disappear in shame. He's spoken openly about his story, even written a memoir about it, and today is viewed by some less as a criminal and more as a kind of folk anti-hero, the man who beat the US dollar at its own game. Frank Bourassa's story is a strange, uncomfortable kind of impressive. Proof of how far obsession, patience, and raw ingenuity can carry a person for better or worse. He built an empire out of paper and ink in a barn, fooled banks across an entire country, and somehow walked away nearly unscathed. If this story blew your mind, hit like, subscribe to Drawn Stories for more, and tell me in the comments, do you think Frank Bourassa got away with it?